Good day, Gen Xers. Welcome to another exciting episode of GenXTalkin, where we try to help you respond well and recover quicker. Along with me today is my good friend, Matt Marshall.
Woo! Hey,
Woo! Say
thanks for
hi, Matt.
having me, Ed.
Thanks for letting me have you. All right, guys. Today, in this episode, I'm going to go over real quick a overall synopsis or summary of some of the key points of our recent trip to Egypt. And in a high level overview, first I'm going to go over the bottom line up front and with some additional information or details, and then go into further details or key takeaways and some possible improves or sustains, like an after action review of sorts, and then some major things to consider, such as safety and travel during COVID, and safety and airport security, and some cultural issues to consider. And then the final thing I'm going to go over is consideration of your overall price and time and money for an international trip. Because let's face it, if you had the travel bug before COVID hit, I don't know how much you've traveled during COVID, but international travel with the pandemic going on has got some significant challenges to it now. So, what do you think about travel during COVID? Have you been able to travel during COVID?
Well, I gotta tell you, I don't want to travel, but I have done a little bit for work.
Uh-huh.
Very little. I went down to
Okay.
Charlotte, North Carolina a bit. I've done trip back to New Mexico, so only domestic travel, and that was hard enough for me
Yeah.
and painful enough. I talked with a coworker of mine. His family is from Scotland. And in the middle of COVID, like I think end of 2020, something like that, he had to go back to Scotland, something related to his mom back there. And he told me during that period of time, you must wear your mask the entire time you're in the airport, the entire time that you're on the plane, getting through the airport where you land at your
Mhm.
destination, and then in most taxi cabs, trains, anything to get you around in the British area. And he said that was easily 14 hours with a mask on. And I
That's
said, there's
interesting.
not a chance. I'm not even going to try it, you know?
I guess different people have different reactions to it. It's interesting to me because every time we've been in any kind of situation where I've had to wear my mask for over an hour straight, that's when I get cough-like symptoms later for
Yeah.
like a day or two. I don't know, it just seemed like I'm not discounting safety precautions during the pandemic. I'm just saying I don't know if it should be mandated. I have some skepticism towards the whole thing. And I think actually some little part of me actually applies a little bit of possibility to a conspiracy theory that all these mandates were partially to greatly inhibit everybody's travel. I mean, let's face it, travel was literally restricted for a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
just weren't even authorized to travel anywhere. Some countries weren't even letting you in. So now we're 2 years into 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and they still have all these mandates in place. You can debate about the safety efficacy of it all you want to, but the
Hmm.
reality of it is that in order for you to travel internationally, number one, you're going to have to make sure you've got your passport updated. Number two, you're going to have your vaccination cards, preferably with these QR codes,
Hmm.
the scan codes. There's applications on your phone you can use to get a QR code that they can see. It just seems like everybody at the airport's looking for a QR code. If you don't have your Vax cards, you can still travel in some cases, and they're going to want at least a rapid test. In most cases, they're going to want a PCR test, but it can't be a self test or like a home test you did on yourself. You're going to have to go someplace and actually get tested, and you're going to have to show them that you've got negative test results.
Yeah.
So
So
this is
all of these millions and millions of COVID tests that they're sending out to people's homes or to the pharmacies or whatever, they're going to be completely useless for travel.
yeah, as far as I know, you can't do a self test or a home test. Most places they're actually requiring a PCR test. So whether or not that's required for you to depart the US, most countries on the other side, they're interpreting that TSA's requirement for you to come back to the US is a PCR test.
Yeah.
Now, Chris Klein said he reviewed it and reviewed it and reviewed it, and he said the actual requirement, you can have a rapid test, it just can't be home or self-administered. That's not the way anybody on the ground in most other countries are how they're interpreting it. It
Yeah.
has to be at least a PCR test. So when you go to the lab overseas, they're going to want to do antigens and all other kind of things. In most countries, the PCR test is $30. There's an extra $30 per family member when you go overseas for just the PCR test. They're going to want to upsell all that with the antigen tests and everything else. They're going to want to try to sell you at least $60 worth of stuff. You only need that PCR test. Okay. So anyway, the bottom line up front for Nish and I is that it was a mission success. Nish and I were able to safely travel to Cairo, Egypt, and back.
Mhm.
We had this opportunity fall upon us, and we had the money, time, and space. We had the lift basically. And what happened was we had a friend overseas over there. He was already in Hurghada, which is a Red Sea beach resort town, several hours from Cairo. And he said, look, guys, I've been traveling and I've got all these points racked up with Marriott and Hilton honors. And he said, I've got these rooms and they're basically going to be dirt cheap, if not free. So Nish and I thought, well, the only thing we have to do is get the plane tickets out there. So Nish and I thought about how much time can we take off. It's a long flight, and seeing the pyramids and riding on a camel were on Nish's bucket list. So for me, part of my life and mission and role is I delight in seeing Nish happy. Nish's happiness is one of my missions in life now. So
That's good.
I was like, so Nisha told me, she's like, yeah, okay. And I was like, okay, let's see if we can make it happen. And we talked about it and we looked at finances and stuff. We were able to find a reasonable ticket. We were able to take a reasonable amount of time off. And then we talked with our friend over there, Chris. He's been on we went live with him, as you saw. So we looked at it and we gamed it and we said, okay, we can do these 2 days in Cairo, these 2 days in Luxor, see everything in Luxor, and these 2 days in Hurghada. Boom, boom, we're in and out. Boom. Mission success. We did it. We got there and back safely. You were there with us part of the way, Matt. What'd you think when we were out there in Hurghada? We were going to have Chris back on for another episode, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting to talk to him the short amount that we did seems like a really just an excellent guy. Would love to hear more experience from him with the international travel. It takes a certain person to want to put up with that type of travel.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and it's definitely a strange person, so it's a different type of person. That's all I can say. And so to glean something from him in a conversation would be great.
Well, I am going to talk to him more too because we're still kind of interested because he's traveled to a lot of countries through a lot of it's been during COVID. And what we saw on the ground out there was like, if you're arriving in Cairo, it's not as bad. But when you're departing from Cairo, you go through 4 security checkpoints. I'm talking like 4 times you put your luggage through a scanner.
Yeah.
You go through a scanner 2 or 3 of those times you're taking your shoes off. Whether you go through the scanner and you have anything that they want to check or not, they still do a very intrusive, full hands-on pat search of you. I mean, they don't just go like, well, they don't tell you either, okay, the scanner detected something here. I'm going to pat here
Right, like
real
they do at
quick.
TSA. Yeah.
Yeah, TSA does it. These guys are like, and then
Yeah.
down your leg and all up your body, and you're like, dude, I don't have anything on me. I went through a scanner, didn't I? What do
Yeah.
you think I have on me? It's a little bit hard to understand, but the reality of it is, what we found out is that they actually seem to consider Americans terrorists. To be honest with you, we felt like we were considered a terroristic threat to them. They were constantly watching it. On one hand, I think they want and love our tourist dollars
Yep.
and they want to try to be friendly with us. On the other hand, we did see that there are literally police and military codes for American tourists. So if you're in a taxi or a tourist vehicle, they have a special license plate color code for tourist taxis or whatever.
Hmm.
So if you come, there's police and other security checkpoints all over the place. So if this vehicle comes to one of those checkpoints, you stop, your driver looks at military and or police personnel there, and he says in Egyptian dialect, I have two Americans with me. They have actually a code word for Americans. So if he says that, you can, in most cases, basically know that you're going to be stuck there for up to 10 to 15 minutes. Because once they find out they've got an American in the taxi or the tourist vehicle, unless it's a tourist vehicle, if it's a taxi, it's one thing. Tourist vehicle, you might get away with just passing through. Number one, the tourist company or the taxi company is going to pay the military or law enforcement basically a bribe.
Yeah.
Part of your fare or tourist fee that you bought is going to police checkpoints to let you through sooner. Number two, they could pull you off the side of the road and wait if you're on a remote road where the traffic is very light, like in the middle of the desert. They could have you wait for 5 other vehicles to come. So that way, they're allowing only like 6 vehicles at a time to pass. While you're there, they're going to check under the hood and in the trunk and everything else. They're going to check all your driver's paperwork, and they may even ask you questions. They did that for Chris several times. They didn't do it to us because we had a driver that was telling them, I have 2 people from Spain with me.
Because you're wearing your
Was wearing a Real Madrid soccer jersey.
nice.
And we just passed through, when you're driving through the desert, we passed through, I think, 3 or 4 checkpoints. We went through Dendera, which is, it's north of Luxor, and it's a site where they have Greek and Roman ruins in there as well as some of the Egyptian stuff. And after we got through Dendera, they knew that this guy had Americans with him, and they actually have a portion of I think we drove like 5 or 10 miles with an actual police escort vehicle, and I'm talking like military police. Like these guys, there were 2 people in the back of this unit with rifles in front of us, looking back at us. So they're kind of like giving us a police escort 5 or 10 miles past Dendera before we got back on the desert road.
It's interesting you use the being from Spain example. There's 2 observations I have there. When Kristen was seeing Nisha's posts, she always was complimenting her and just saying the way she's dressing is very, very non-US.
Right.
And wearing a Real Madrid, that's, I think, one of the secrets to any type of international travel is don't look like an American, because you then become a target, whether it's in this strange situation where you're considered a terrorist. I'm sure it's that way in other places as well, but whether it's that or whether it's you're a target because you have money, they know you have money and they're going to go after you. Right. If you just don't look like you're American, then you can usually, it's kind of like what we talked about in the last episode, you become a harder target for them. When I was doing a lot of personal international travel, did a European kind of backpacking trip, I realized the difference between how a Canadian or an Australian who speak the same basic language, right, how they can get by in certain scenarios and an American can't. I actually got to a point where I got rid of the USA backpack patch and I put a Canadian patch on instead, because they look at that and they go, oh, he's Canadian. Okay, never mind.
Well, Chris dresses and carries himself this way. And while we were in Cairo, as we left, he had another traveling friend come in there, and she's a part travel agent and part world traveler herself. And there's a certain way that European backpackers, they just all look the same. So they got the loose walking pants and a
Yeah.
little backpack and a very modest long sleeve shirt or whatever, and they just look like they're the type that's probably going to stay at a $5 to $10 a night hostel.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're kind of like dressing and dumbing yourself down, so to speak. And
Mhm.
people are like, oh, I don't know where they're from. Are they from Czechoslovakia? Are they from Sweden? Are they from Germany or something like that? So
Yeah.
it was interesting, and I intentionally brought those soccer jerseys out for that reason. I had a couple of other very non-US looking clothes with me, but Chris dresses like that all the time, and he looks very inconspicuous. But it is a weird situation out there. But we had a nice rabbit meal, specially prepared for us by a new friend in Luxor, city known for having the world's largest open-air museum. The whole city. It took us almost 2 days to see it all. So one
Wow.
whole day of 7 straight hours. We were going on both sides of the Nile, so it was, you have the Valley of the Kings and Hatshepsut's temple and other statues and sites on one side of the river, and then you have Karnak and Luxor temple on the other side. And at the end of that day and all that, we were smoked. So you
Yeah.
had all that before we were in Cairo, and we basically got to the pyramids, dumped our cab driver there because he was supposed to drive us there and help us tour guide. And we ended up doing it all on our own because we were fed up with this guy. Long story short, we walked all the way around the whole site of the Sphinx and the pyramids. We rode on camels. There's a very nice restaurant out there called the Nine Pyramids, I think it is. Very reasonably priced food, very good meal that we had up there, very relaxing. So we had one good, really good experience in Cairo. Most of the experience in Luxor was really nice. And then we were able to drive from Luxor, see Dendera, and drive through the desert, go all the way to Hurghada. Now, Hurghada is again, the Red Sea resort town.
How long did it take you to get from Luxor to Hurghada?
That's about 3.5 hours.
Okay.
And that for 3.5 hour taxi ride, that was like 130 US dollars. So
Okay.
imagine that in the States. Imagine being in a taxi for 3.5 hours in the States.
I'd rent a car.
Absolutely. You'd
Yeah.
rent a car for maybe a couple $100 and you'd still
Yep.
be cheaper than a taxi.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think if you take a taxi from an airport in the US and you end up driving like 45 minutes, it's like $200.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey there, Gen Xers. Ed and I wanted to introduce you to PackRabbit, our newest affiliate group. PackRabbit grew from one person's desire to craft a healthier and more efficient way to carry a pack. Now, PackRabbit is a small company made up of entrepreneurs, hunters, athletes, military, and outdoor enthusiasts. Their designs are influenced by diverse backgrounds and personal experiences that tilt them heavily towards simplicity and utility. PackRabbit believes that multifunctionality is not a condition of luxury, but an absolute necessity. One key aspect of several of their backpacks is a folding shelf that turns into a rather comfy seat when out on the trail. We invite you to check them out. The link for their website is in the show notes.
So I'm going to go into some further details. We've talked about the safety and the COVID situation as far as what you're required to have for travel documents.
Yeah.
What I will say is that if we're flying American Airlines domestic, you have airline stewardess Nazis in there saying, get your mask over your nose. You can be asleep they've got the lights turned off or whatever for a night flight, a red eye or whatever, and they will find you and they will tell you, get that mask over your nose. You're like, jeez.
Jeez.
You get on Emirates Air or Lufthansa and it's an international flight and nobody cares. Nobody's enforcing that mask mandate. You get into the airport, some of the employees may be wearing a mask, most of them aren't. Nobody in Egypt really cares. Nobody anywhere in Egypt really cared about the masks at all. It's a different story out there. So, as far as we could tell, internationally, globally, this mask mandate thing, and especially vaccinations, there's nobody talking about getting vaccinated in Egypt. I
Yeah.
don't know what kind of access to it that they have, but it seems like America got Alibaba into the mask and vaccine mandate. What I mean by Alibaba is when you
Yeah.
get on the ground in Egypt as an American tourist, I'll give you a couple of examples. We're at the airport. Chris is calling us. The hotel we're staying at is literally right across the street, but we didn't know that. Taxi drivers are swarming you saying, oh no, it's a half-hour walk. You can't walk there. And Chris is telling us, no, stay there. I'm trying to get to you. However, security at the hotel will not let him leave because you can't go to the airport without travel documents.
Oh,
They need to see that you have a reason to go to the airport because otherwise, oh, who knows? Maybe you'll
you're a
blow the
terrorist,
airport up.
right?
Yeah,
You're
it's all this pretended and postured security position. I don't know whether the threat is real or not. I just can't remember the last time Egyptian authorities captured an American trying to blow something up in Egypt.
right.
But apparently it's a real threat to them, sort of like other threats are to us. At any rate, Chris couldn't get to us. He told us to stay in, and we could see buildings on the outside, but we didn't know which were which.
Yeah.
We did have a couple of people inside the airport tell us that the hotel you're going to, you can walk to, it's only like 4 minutes away. Since we couldn't verify that, I talked with this one taxi driver. He said, it's just $10. And I finally said, okay, fine. I gave this guy $10. We got in his cab. As we're driving down the cab, we drove down about 50 yards and he made a U-turn to the other side of the road where he let us off. And he's like, here you go. And they do this with us with this shit-eating smile on their face, like they just did you a huge favor. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, you just charged me $10 to get us across the street. And they smile at you and they say,
Yep.
it's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
They were constantly saying things like that to us. We paid a concierge at the hotel a good amount of money, but for Egypt prices, a good amount of money for this cab driver to take us to the pyramids and be our tour guide. And it covered all entry fees and everything else like that. Get to the pyramids, the guy says, oh, no, it doesn't cover entry fees and tour guide or anything else like that. It only covered the ride to over here, from the airport to here.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, dude, we paid you this much. And he's going back and forth on the phone with this concierge. And this is a Le Meridian Marriott employee concierge.
Hmm.
So finally, we put the pressure on him, or he's like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, it did cover all this, but it was too late. We already kicked our cab driver out. We was like, we're done with you. Everywhere you go in Egypt, people are trying to Alibaba you.
Yeah.
And they know that you're stuck there with them. And this is a societal and cultural issue in Egypt. It it's good that they normally frown upon actual thievery. This is something that if you're an actual thief or robber, they'll cut your hand off for.
Hmm.
However, to scam somebody is totally acceptable to them. And to do it just brazenly and openly, not a problem at all. The problem I have with it is they're constantly trying to befriend you and act like they're your friend and they're doing you a favor
Yeah.
while they're basically ripping you off and they know it. And this is where it gets just like overall society wise, we didn't find anybody in Egypt that was just, there's some that were genuinely friendly and genuinely trying to help us. But by and large, just like over 90% of the people just have this way about them. Well, you'll never see anybody from anywhere in the world travel to America as a tourist and have the whole of an American society try to just be bad people.
One of the things I've always thought about, though, is if a person flies into JFK or then to LaGuardia and they're in New York, you expect that kind of behavior.
Right.
You expect the kind of rough and combative, in your face kind of behavior. Whereas if you go into, let's say you go into Missouri or Utah or something like that, they have a reason. And I know Utah and Missouri are the two Mormon capitals. So there's a reason why I would name those two, because they want something from you. They want
Yeah,
you to come and be part of their church. I'm
right.
guessing that's the reason the way they act the way they do. So there's other reasons for that kindness, but there's places you go when you land in the US where it's kindness. It's good.
Yes, there's people there that help you get from one side of the airport to the other. Like when we were coming back from Hurghada to Cairo, and we had to get from Terminal 3 to Terminal 2, and then again there were taxi drivers that wanted to drive us there. It's literally around the corner, and they're trying to tell us, no, it's like 3/4 of a mile. It's going to be a 15-minute walk. No, it's like less than 100 yards around the corner. You jerk. You're lying intentionally. Now, I get trying to get a little bit of money off of somebody, but you have a whole culture there that this is their mentality. But I mean, to be honest with you, we had fun. We saw a lot of great sights. Typically, we would have wanted to stay at least 2 or 3 weeks. We didn't this time because we were able to just get back in a different time. And we thought the amount of time that we spent in Egypt was plenty of time, trust me. But safety wise, you're going to have to look at the Department of State and other websites to see what kind of risk is out there. Bottom line up front, Egypt is a high risk country. State Department says high risk red for terrorism. Cairo is in astoundingly shocking squalor and decay. There are whole enormous sections of the city that look like there was an airstrike on it. Like the buildings are leveled, it's just rubble. However, there's those areas plus the city of the dead, which is their huge cemetery, where over 1 million people live in the cemetery. That's how poor they are.
Oh my
And
goodness.
nobody cares about these poor people at all. And you have to drive through this area and another section that's very similar to it up to the point you get to the pyramids. And then they treat you differently there as well. There's no kindness at the entrance area of the pyramids at all. They let a group of other Arabs of 5 in front of us, and they're like, "Come on in." And when they saw us, they were like, "Hurry up! It's $30 each. Hurry up! Give me the money." And then we got through, and immediately it was like, "Put your masks on." And we're like, "Okay, we put our mask on." And they have airport security type screening devices there that put your stuff through here. Come on. And those 5 Arabs that they had in front of us, they're like, "Come on, brother." No masks, no security check, no rush. So that's just what you have to deal with when you're out there. Seriously, the whole regions of Cairo, it looked like you were almost in like Syria or Yemen, like war zone of destruction and decay.
Do you know anything about the history? Because at one point in time, Cairo used to be a destination location for people, didn't it? I mean, like the Europeans thought of Cairo as this like very exotic, beautiful place that lots of people love to go to. It just doesn't sound like it's that case anymore.
No, I don't think it was ever that way. I think that we're talking about slightly richer Europeans that would go to places like the Marriott Resort right next to the pyramids.
Ah,
It's like the castle on the hill. There's resorts that you're gonna be at, and to be honest with you, like in no other country in the world, I've been to Jamaica where I felt like I better stay on the resort. I've been to Dominican
yeah,
Republic where I felt like I better stay on the resort.
yeah.
Other areas that are a little bit more passive, like Thailand or the Philippines, I felt like I could venture out in town a little bit. Costa Rica, other places like that.
Yeah.
Cairo, especially Cairo anyway, you're going to want to stay on the resort. And while the resort is fine and it's like that resort destination and you got the pyramids there and that's epic, oh, the rest of the town, they're not going to be friendly at all. It probably made a drastic turn right about 1948, shortly
Okay.
after World War II, and the powers that be manifested the state of Israel. I'm not saying anything anti-Zionist. I'm just saying from a Muslim perspective, that was what they called the Great Nakba or the catastrophe. And in my understanding, Saudi Arabians, Egyptians, and others, Egyptians don't even consider themselves Arabs anyway. They consider themselves Egyptian or heroic. They say the Arabs are from Saudi Arabia, those areas. So ethnically, I don't know exactly how they're identifying with the Palestinian struggle, except to say, well, the state of Israel is Jewish and we don't like Jews. To me, that was another cultural indicator. If you want to talk about racism, these guys are racist amongst themselves a little bit. There's people from Lower Egypt, that's the actually northern part by Cairo, and there's people from southern Egypt, from Luxor, around that area, and they consider these guys down here Saidis, which was almost like calling them Polacks, and they're actually all Egyptians.
Yeah, right.
These guys don't, they may not necessarily like Libyans. They certainly don't like Sudanese. They don't necessarily like Saudi Arabians as much. So a lot of the common people there in Egypt are actually quite ethnocentric, if you ask me.
It's amazing that there's so many people in the United States who are so uninformed. They have no idea that these other countries are racist.
It's
They're
amazing.
making it sound like it's the US that's so racist. But if you look at like Canada, racist, Australia, racist, every European country, racist, India, racist within its own borders.
Yeah.
And Egypt, apparently racist within its own borders. And you're just like, holy cow. Everyone, we talked about this off camera a bit about the US being the greatest country in the world. What other country is even close to having a melting pot of people where people coexist? Where else?
It just seems to
Not.
like sort of melt away, and you have opportunities. It's kind of subtly understood that it's getting more and more of a culture of diversity and inclusion, which I think we should have a limit to that, because diversity and inclusion in some circles doesn't seem to include being a straight Caucasian Protestant anymore these days. But other than that, it's kind of understood in America. You don't ask or care about gender or sex orientation or race or ethnicity or anything else like that. And growing up as a kid, we didn't even have that much racial diversity in our area. However, we just never grew up to where it's like, I'm almost like colorblind. I see people of different places, and I can tell after a great deal of world travel and experience, oh, this person is probably Punjab, whereas this person over here is probably Hindi. This person over here is Vietnamese, and this person over here is probably from Thailand or Cambodia. You start to develop that. I can tell this person is probably Egyptian, and this person is probably Libyan, and this person is probably Saudi. But it's not like I place some sort of stigma on them. I just recognize
that's where they're from. Yeah.
First and foremost, if they're in America, as an American, they're American.
Right.
And if they're at the airport, even if they speak in with an accent, oh, I can speak a little bit of Arabic, I can speak a little bit of Spanish, and if they need help, I can direct them around the corner without trying to rip them off of $15 or something like that.
Yeah, go up here, take a left, you're there. Done.
Yeah,
No
I just
skin off my
find
back. Yeah.
with all of my travel, I've seen Scottish people that were racist, Irish, Italians, Greeks, Germans, Spaniards. The people in Spain are insanely. And let's talk about borders and border security. On the Egyptian Sudanese border, the Egyptian military has U.S. supplied MRAP vehicles with 50 calibers, and they're trained on you. They're pointing their weapon at you, at tourists, just in case some tourist decides, because you're near the Aswan Dam. You never can tell when somebody wants to blow up the Aswan Dam to flood the whole Egyptian river valley.
Yeah.
This is how they're guarding the border. And when I was in Spain, I learned that Spain has an enclave in Morocco where they have the area fenced off. There's a rabbit run, there's concertina wires. And not only is that, if you're a Moroccan Arab and you want to try to migrate or travel tourist wise into Spain, that's fine. However, if you're from some other African country and your skin is black, the Spanish authorities actually cross over the fence sometimes to beat these people in their camps with sticks and burn their campsites down. And nobody says anything about that kind of border security,
Right.
those type of countries, whereas conservatives wanted to enhance border security on the southwest border, and you had Trump saying build the wall. Nisha and I recently drove by El Paso, and she's like, "Well, where's Juarez?" I said, "Juarez is right there." She's like, "Where's the wall?" There is no wall,
Whoa.
okay? There's people. She's like, "Where's the river?" I said, "That little trickle there, you can walk over without getting knee deep. That's the Rio Grande."
Yeah.
And they're crossing that river by the thousands. We have politicians posturing about border security or lack thereof here and fronting on the issue that they say is racism. And in other countries, we have serious racism and nobody knows about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not American politics. It's all political here.
Part of our talking about being prepared is hopefully we're presenting information to people that's unbiased, it's moderate and neutral, it's not left, it's not right. We're
Yeah.
trying to say, look, here's the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground are A, B, C, and 1, 2, 3. And all this other banner and bluster is on Fox and CNN. In a lot of cases, is drivel, and they're not reporting news and information. They're trying to create this narrative to influence your mind to thinking that there's some sort of steps or measures we must take as Americans to enhance border security or embrace critical race theory or whatever. All these kind of things. I would say that critical race theory might be a good topic to talk about if we want to take it to its logical extreme and say, look, there's people that in Egypt that believe those pharaohs that enslaved those people for quite a while were actually black Africans. Now, we talked about that with some people in Egypt, and they were like, no, no, no. You look at these statues, and you look at their facial features and their lips, and those are not black Africans because they have a bias. And I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, look at that picture of King Tut, and look at these
That's
other pictures.
that's dark.
They don't look like they were tan. They look actually darker than that. And if you want to say all these slaves, they're like, oh, all these slaves were from all over the place, blah, blah, blah. They were showing us some parts of Luxor where the king's throne at that time was on a pedestal, and on the pedestal he had hieroglyphs of all his slaves, and his slaves were Indian, Saudi Arabian, black, Asian. They were pointing this out to us and saying, look, our king, all of his slaves were from all these other races. So you know that none of these pharaohs could have been black. And I'm like, dude, honestly, if we're having an open-minded, honest discussion and we want to get into dialogue about critical race theory, let's really get into it. Let's not half-step this and say try to shame people for being born a certain color.
Yeah.
There's only one race, that's the human race. Doesn't matter where you're born to me. Doesn't matter what your skin color, your ethnicity, your race, creed, religion, anything else like that. And if you're an American, I don't care about that either. I consider you an American.
Yeah.
And I think we here in America that we have some challenges. We can do better. We can make enhancements. We can make enhancements to we can grow. We can have that spiritual and emotional growth and development. But don't tell me America is the worst country because I've been to other countries and there is just blatant, in your face, ignorant racism everywhere else I've been.
Yeah, it's interesting because Martin Luther King, he really did have something when he said content of your character, because an evil person is an evil person, whether they're black,
Exactly.
white, yellow, red, doesn't matter. Evil person is evil. And that's just the way they are. Unfortunately, I think we're in this position in the United States where color has become more important than content of their character. And I think it's just wrong. When you talk about critical race theory and having that discussion, it might be actually an interesting topic of discussion
Yeah.
to have here on the show. I think it would be interesting to have that. I'm not going to say pander to the left or anything like that, but it would be interesting to have that discussion with people of different ethnicities in the discussion. During all the riots that were occurring a year or so ago, I got so tired of hearing about all of that stuff because it was on the news constantly, and it was, you're white, so you're bad. That's all that was going through my mind. I'm a white male, straight male, and I must be a horrible person. That was the messaging that kept being conveyed to me over and over and over by the media and whatever else. So whenever I heard, oh, there's diversity training, don't you want to be part of the diversity training in our corporation? Or don't you want to join the diversity group so that gays and Black people are lifted up? And I'm like, no, because all they're doing is stomping on me to get up. Oh, that's what it feels like to me.
Yep.
So it was a frustrating period of time. The time that it got really difficult is when our church started coming in and doing a similar type of diversity. And it was from the pulpit, somebody talking and trying to apply some sort of narrative to us. But it was interesting the way it was happening. The pastor was trying to explain, look, himself, the pastor, being a white person, didn't understand what all these protests and things were until he had a discussion with a Black pastor.
Yeah.
And he had a discussion. They were brothers, and they had this eternal connection with each other because of their observance of Christianity. They knew they could get through all of the ethnic differences and the racism differences and try to come at it from the perspective of their religion, right?
Yeah.
And so he had the Black pastor come up and give a presentation to us and discuss with us. My immediate reaction was, here we go. I'm going to be inundated with the negative again, because that's what it always was during that period of time. But it didn't turn into that. A bit more positive. It allowed me to see things from a different perspective. So it was pretty important and helpful to me. I still have pretty quick negative responses when people start talking about critical race theory and other aspects of that.
Yeah, and it's what's being pushed in the news as an issue, and when you already have a distrust of the news, that doesn't help.
No.
I love talking with people of different backgrounds, and that way it helps me understand what their perspectives are, because the truth of the matter is, in America, we can do better, and we have to start trying to do a little bit better. There's a lot of minorities that do have legitimate grievances. There is a little bit of a systemic thing. There is a little bit of a history there, and we could talk about it for a long time. But if you're going to apply that type of training or education, you need to do it from, number one, from a non-biased and open perspective. Let's talk about the Greeks and the Romans. Those guys were never flawless either.
Yeah.
But a lot of the basis or foundation of what we're considering our current society and civilization comes from that. But everybody forgets that civilizations are built one on top of the other. And that's what you try to be moving forward as you're getting into your spiritual growth and development. You try to be better. And you can't try to be better by just pointing out all of the problems. Anybody can point out what the problems are. You have to also try to work towards what are the solutions that we can do right here, right now. And some of them aren't build a wall, or some of them aren't come on over and flood the country. Some of the solutions aren't, let's say, for example, defund the police or whatever. Let's be for real. There's some problems. We got to work through them. Let's not be blinded by a bias that's either left or right. If you want to get into it, let's get into it and realize that if you have this international travel like we've had recently in Egypt, you get a broader experience. You want to take the best experiences that you can from it without forgetting or being negligent of your negative experiences. You got to put them together and say, this is what I saw going on over there, and I come to understand it a little bit. They're extremely poor. They want to shark on me, but their attitude and behavior as a whole is rather ignorant. There's a lot of racism over there. There's a lot of cultural issues over there.
Yeah.
It's not a good society or civilization overall. And here in America, we do have some enhancements or improvements that we can make. However, we are not this demon that some people are trying to make us out to be.
So let me ask you this. Speaking of Egypt, do you ever want to return there?
No, we'll never be back.
Okay.
Of all
Okay.
the places that we've gone, we can honestly say, oh yeah, I'll go back to Spain, France, Germany, Italy, Greece, probably Turkey, islands all around the Caribbean, Mexico, Central and South America. We will never be back to Egypt.
Yeah. Similar, we talked about this a little bit earlier. I have no desire to ever go to. Now, I may be placed in a situation where I have to go for business or something,
Yeah,
but I would never myself sign up for a ticket to go to India. I would not want to go to the Philippines, although I think I saw a different side of the Philippines because I hear stories about beaches in the Philippines and up in the mountains or something. I don't know. Some places where you're out in nature, maybe it's a bit nicer. Similar type of thing. I didn't really like the people as much as I did in other places. Maybe it was just the people that I met during that period of time.
that could be the big cities and those general tendencies of people that are from the big cities
Yeah.
in their overall attitude as well, because there's difference between being in Bangkok where they're assuming you're coming for sex tourism
Yep.
and going 3 hours south into a small beach town where everybody treats you nice.
Yeah.
If in the Philippines, if you were in Manila, if you were able to get 2 or 3 hours outside of Manila and be in a more hilly or beach area, I think you'd have been treated differently. And it's
Yeah.
probably the same like Bangladesh, get outside of that area, you might run into a different experience. Mumbai, India, that's where you run into a little bit of the differences. Then again, what you could be in Costa Rica or something like that and be in a resort area, just go down the road a little ways and accidentally stumble upon an area that's run by some sort of John McAfee type of cartel or something. If you're in that area,
Yeah.
you never can tell where there's a rich American or some other rich European or something like that, and those people have totally polluted that area as well with some kind of toxicity.
That's why I mentioned New York. If you go to New York, there's a lot of Chicago is probably the same way. There's a lot of places you can go in some of these major cities where even as Americans, we would not want to go. So if you're a foreigner coming in, and I'm trying to think of it from the perspective of if I'm going to another country into their biggest city and expecting that to show something relative to the culture itself, I'm probably mistaken in doing that. But it from the opposite side, if they come into the US and see New York City, or they go to LA and they see LA as the what America is, it is so far from what America is. I'm trying to be all balanced in mind as to how I'm approaching the international travel stuff myself.
Yeah, it's a challenge. The biggest thing you still got to figure in is that COVID passports, visas,
Hmm.
time, money, and space. I mean, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it. But it's sure the COVID situation puts a huge constraint or restriction on anybody's desire to really get out there.
Now, you
And
guys
you
have
have
done other international travel during COVID too, right? Or no? Just
no, not during
just
COVID.
domestic?
Not during COVID. The last thing we had was Costa Rica, I think, just before COVID hit.
Ah, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say that I have any. It's sad because I did a whole bunch of international travel through my younger years. Enjoyed the heck out of it. I really did. It's unfortunately that I rarely had a chance to take the family with me, but and now I just don't want to go. So it's kind of a bummer that I don't want to go to international places. I'd much rather experience more in North America, in the US, and maybe up into Canada a bit, down a little
Yeah.
bit down in Mexico, maybe.
Well, all that said, we've covered our little Egyptian jaunt and I'm going to have a blog on it. Do you want to get into parting thoughts on this, Matt?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. I think I've already shared a good portion of what would be my parting shots, and that is living vicariously through you and Nisha. You guys made it look beautiful. You made with all the pictures and the cool, like seeing her walking off into the distance. You're doing
Yeah,
that typical Instagram picture kind of stuff. So you
yeah,
made it look nice. You made it look like it's a beautiful place to visit, and you covered up well for what is the true culture of what you guys had to experience. And I think
mhm,
that's a cautionary tale for most people. My daughter, she wants to experience the world. She wants to go out and see this type of stuff. So she's going to go into these situations with the rose-colored glasses,
yeah.
thinking everything's going to be beautiful and rosy. So I think the way I'm approaching this discussion is from that perspective of balance and saying, okay, I don't want to just pass judgment on another culture just because the way they're acting and then the report that you guys have given to us, your experiences. But I also want to try to make people, when they come visit us, have that feeling of hospitality. Like, you can come visit us, you can come hang out with us, and we'll show you some of the neat sights around the area, some of the cooler places to go for sunrises and sunsets, and experience some of more local life than just where you may read on TripAdvisor. And definitely thank you for bringing the ideas of what you had to experience for COVID during international travel. It still seems very, very confusing to me, and I avoid confusion whenever possible. So probably won't be traveling internationally much, but when you do, I will live vicariously through you. So thank you.
All
On
right.
on to you, Ed.
All right, guys. In my parting thoughts for this, I'm going to say our goal and purpose here is to try to put out information for preparedness so you can respond well and recover faster. And with that mindset in my head, which Matt has helped me kind of acquire and re-strengthen, we went into this trip into Egypt, and my wife and I, we discussed these things, and we think and talk and walk it through. And we always say, honey, it's you and me against the world. And no matter what happens, we're going to enjoy ourselves. We're going to have fun. Nothing's going to get us down. We anticipate struggles out there. We had a couple of exceptional issues, but we were able to see and experience some exceptional beauty. And
Mhm.
that's what we take and keep with us. But we wanted to present that to everybody as this is and was a beautiful experience. And it was. But we're not going to ignore the fact that there are these challenges out there, and we want to inform everybody of what some of these challenges are for preparedness so you respond well and you recover faster. So you're going to get out there, guys. If you're going to travel internationally, you got to have it in your mind that, I mean, you're going to see beautiful things. You're going to hopefully see what you want to see with good weather and everything. But there are some terribly tragic pitfalls out there, some to avoid and some to be aware of. Like,
Mhm.
we got to the pyramids and there was all those challenges at the entry place, and there were throngs of poor people coming up on us as well. And Nisha had a woman with a baby in her arms that was going to try to put this baby in Nisha's arms. And Chris's friend said that it's the same thing when she was in Aswan. She said, typically I try to avoid people handing me something off, but she came from the side and she was just like here. And her natural reaction was like, oh, I've got a poor baby in my arms now. So that puts you in an extremely precarious situation. And she's able to put this baby back in the mother's arms. I don't know what people are expecting, but in her case, she said that baby had scurvy and lice. So the next thing she knew, she had to basically treat herself for scurvy and lice when she got back
Yeah.
to the hotel. Guys, there's a whole world out there to experience and enjoy and be a part of in this universal experience of man's tapestry-like walk through existence. And there are unfortunately borders and barriers and challenges. And I invite you to consider reading the chapter of Genesis and going to the section of the story where they talk about what happened with the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
Regardless of what your take on that story is, we have, I believe, leaders of the world that are still doing that kind of thing today. They're trying to confuse religion, race, sex, ethnicity, color, creed, all these things They've created invisible lines. And I'm not saying be this universal civil mundi or whatever and not have any kind of no name, no slogan. But I'm saying there's a lot of challenges and barriers out there that are man-made, and they're probably orchestrated and managed and controlled specifically in some cases to get people confused and at odds with
Mhm.
one another, at odds with people you have never met and may never even meet, especially here in America, left and right, things like this. Put all that stuff aside and let's come together and see what the legitimate grievances are, see what the challenges are, see where our risks and threats and vulnerabilities are, and work together to come up with those reasonable step-by-step integrated enhancements and improvements to our lives.
Yeah.
That's my parting thought, guys.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Matt.
You want to close us out?
Yeah, I'll close this out. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Make it a great day, guys, wherever you're at in the world, literally, and wherever you're at in the space in your head. Go out there and make it a great day.
Yeah.
Respond well, recover faster, and be prepared, and close us out, Matt.
This is Matt Marshall signing off.
And this is Ed Wasson signing off. Thanks for joining us, guys.